Good morning, everybody. Hi, Kate. Hi, Sam. Hi, Heather.
Morning.
Good morning.
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 Morning, everyone.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning, Councilmember Sweet. Uh-oh, watch out. Sam, where's the safety?
I thought that was Jim Wagner saying good morning.
Possibly could have been.
Heather, it was Dom, right? Okay, thank you. Good morning, Rhonda.
Good
How are
morning,
you?
Adam. We do have all 4 board members present.
Oh, good.
Whenever you're ready to start.
Is the TAC members present?
We have 4 of a required or suggested 5 for quorum of the TAC. So
Great. Hi, Chair Stom. How are you?
Morning, Adam.
Good to see you.
You too.
Great. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Before we really dive into anything, I wanted to welcome everybody and thank the TAC members for joining us for this meeting today. We really appreciate your service to Mountain Lion and your support in this meeting today. Before we dive into anything, I'd like for us to maybe do a quick round of introductions. So maybe we can start with the TAC members.
do you want me to call on each person that's here, Adam? Would that be easier?
Sure, you could. And maybe just introduce your name and the agency that you're here on behalf of and how long you've been a TAC member.
And then if we can add to that, if you don't mind, under roll call, we were going to ask for, sorry, one moment. Each person to say one word that would describe our current transit systems or service. Can we include that?
Absolutely. Say that one more time.
If you say I'll call on the person and you give your agent, or I'll call the person in the agency, and then if you respond with one word that describes the current transit system or service.
I like that. That's great.
Great. Okay. So for the TAC, we're going to start with, I'm going to start with people I know that are here already. Kevin Parks.
Yep. Good morning, everybody. I am the City of Flagstaff representative to the TAC and customer focus.
Erin Stom, NAU.
Hi, good morning. Erin Stom with Northern Arizona University, and I would say progressing.
Judy Maynor, also with NAU.
Hi, I'm Judy Maynor. I would say good customer service.
Kurt Stull, CCC.
Good morning. I'm Kurt Stahl. I'm with Coconino Community College. I've been on the TAC for 2 years now, and I would use the word expanding and exciting.
Thank you. Metro Plan, Jeff Mylbeck.
Good morning, Jeff Mylbeck with Metro Plan. I've been on the TAC for 2 years now, although David Wessel usually attends. And I would use the word exciting. I'm sorry, excellent. Excellent is my word.
Thank you. That is all of our TAC members that I know are present. I'm going to just double check. We are expecting Chris Tressler from Coconino County and possibly Shane Dilly from City of Flagstaff, and our economic development representative, Gail Jackson. I don't believe any of them have joined at this point.
I forgot to include my years of service on TAC, because if there's a prize, I think I got this one nailed. Other than the Mountain Line staff, I think I've been on TAC 10 years.
That's incredible.
That just means I'm old, Adam.
And dedicated.
As you guys can hear, my voice is going. I may not be speaking as much as usual today.
This is Christopher from Coconino County. Can you hear me?
Okay, I believe Chris Tressler has joined us now. Chris
Yeah, it's
from Coconino County.
maybe
And
my
you'll just tell us your
camera's not
years of
working.
service and one word that you would use to describe the current transit system or service.
Yeah, so with Coconino County, I serve as the county engineer, and I've more been playing fill-in for about the last 1.5 or 2 years. And I think one word to describe Flagstaff's current transit system is growing.
And I have been told that Gail Jackson just joined. Gail is with Econa, and she's our economic development representative. If you let us know how long you've been on the TAC and one word to describe Flagstaff's current transit system or service.
One word to describe the transit would be essential. And I have been on the TAC committee for about 9 months, I believe. So it's great to be here.
Thank you. Adam, did you want me to proceed with the board members?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay. We do not have Coconino County board members with us today, but as a guest, we have Judy Begay's assistant, Cheryl Barlow. Cheryl, are you there? Okay. City of Flagstaff, Adam Shimoni.
Hey, everybody. I'm Adam, as you likely know, and I've been with the board for a few years now, mostly as an alternative. But the word I would choose is, I think effective. I think someone already said efficient, which was what I was thinking too, but I would say effective.
Thank you. City of Flagstaff, Miranda Sweet.
Good morning again. I am newly elected council member Sweet, and the word I came up with is innovative.
Great. NAU, Dana Coley.
Sorry, the previous speaker just took my word. It's innovative.
Okay. NAU also Josh Mayer.
Good morning, everybody. Josh Mayer with NAU. I've been an alternate for just about a year now. The word that I would use to describe our transit system would be necessary.
Thank you. Tony Williams, CCC.
Good morning. I'm Tony Williams. I'm the Dean of Student Affairs here at Coconino Community College. I've been on the board of directors for 1 month. This is my second meeting, and I would describe the transit system as being student friendly.
Thank you. Shane Dilley from the City of Flagstaff on our TAC has joined us. And Shane, are you there? If you'll just let us know one word to describe Flagstaff's current transit system or service, we'd appreciate it. Shane, are you there? Okay. I know that we admitted him to the meeting, so he may just be getting set up. We also have attorneys Scott Holcomb and Chris Beecher with us at this time. And we have staff in the training room and in their offices or working from home. Thank you.
Rhonda, this is Scott Holcomb. Can I possibly put my word in?
Sure.
I've been representing NEPA, I think, for a decade, often with previously with Fred Bisman as general counsel. And based on the work that we're doing with Mountain Line, my word would be future focused. That's what the projects we're really working on are very future oriented. Thank you. And if I may, to those who have not met him before, Chris Beecher is also on the line. He is a newly minted attorney, but has a lot of experience. He is with the Navajo Nation and other government entities, working with them prior to going to law school. He's going to be assisting in the representation and be a regular member of the family.
Thank you for the introduction there, Scott. And just my word that I was thinking about was exciting. I'm very excited to be here. I was in the previous TAC meeting and this is my second. I just want to say welcome and thank you for having me. And I am looking forward to learning much more about the overall system, but it's exciting to me and it's something really interesting to learn about. As someone who's originally from Tuba City, Arizona, I've been to Flagstaff many times throughout my lifetime. So it's very excited to be a part of the team. Thank you.
Very good. And I see Shane has joined us. Shane, do you want to introduce yourself and say one word that reflects what Mountain Line is to you?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I answered Rhonda's question initially and nobody responded. I thought I was going to get a laugh. It was a great response, you guys. But anyway, I was having problems with my mic. My thought in response to this is increasingly convenient is the word that I would use for the transit service. Thank you.
Increasingly or convenient? Which one?
Hey, my comment initially was that Tony had 2 words. You guys let him have 2 words. And you didn't give him a hard time about it, council member.
That was a hyphenated word.
Oh, so was mine.
Welcome, Shane. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody.
Rhonda, is that everybody?
That is everyone.
Wow, that's great. What a group. Again, thank you all so much for taking the time to be a part of Mountain Line in whatever capacity it is that you're representing. It's really an honor to be working with all of you on this great work. You're welcome to leave your cameras on during the meeting. You're welcome to turn them off. If you have a comment that you'd like to make, raise your hand. You can jump in. I think the chat section is not viewable to me, so assuming that's the case, just jump in however you feel comfortable. We do want your feedback. Obviously, for decisions that we're voting on, the board is the only board members are who are able to vote. But we do want to hear from all the members here if there is anything you'd like to add. So we have a good agenda for us to go over today and a really good discussion towards the end of our agenda. So we're going to jump right in. But before we do, I just want to let everybody know that the board is able to recess into executive session if we so choose to. And with that, I think we are at safety minutes. Or are we good on roll call, Rhonda?
Yes, we are good. Thank you.
Great. Let's jump right into safety minutes. Sam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board and TAC. May's safety minute is on job place complacency. Complacency is often a focus point when discussing workplace safety at many companies. For the most part, we understand what complacency is and what areas of work or life it affects us in. However, even though we may acknowledge it, we may not fully grasp the consequences it can have or what we need to do to overcome it. Complacency is defined as a feeling of quiet pleasure or security, often while unaware of some potential danger or defect. Many employees who are complacent with the hazards of a task are experienced and are well aware that they exist. Workers are not unaware of the risk, but are more likely to accept the risks without taking the proper time or energy to address the hazards because they have been doing the work for so long. For workers who are experienced in their job and have become complacent with certain aspects or hazards of their job, it is important to take steps to avoid this trap. Here are some things you can do to battle complacency in your workplace. 1, recognize work tasks that you may be used to doing that you no longer take the same precautions when performing them. Think back to when you first got this job or the first time you did a specific task. Were you more cautious or did you follow more safety procedures? Number 2, audit yourself or even have a coworker audit your work to see what your shortcomings may be when completing work tasks. Having someone else give you constructive feedback can help give you an honest look at where you can improve. Number 3, once you realize what risks you are leaving yourself exposed to, begin to make it a habit to take the steps that mitigate or eliminate that hazard. Once an action is repeated over and over, it has become a habit. It becomes automatic, and it is much less likely that you will have to face complacency to get yourself to do it. And number 4, fight the urge to take the easy way out or make the easier decision when it comes to following safety rules or procedures. Rationalizing why you should allow yourself to cut corners leaves you more open to risk. Hold yourself and others around you accountable to what needs to be done. We all face and fight off complacency from time to time. It is important to monitor yourself when it comes to complacency on the job. What corners are you cutting? Why are you cutting those corners? What do you need to do to address in order to resist complacency, the hazards of your work? Thank you and welcome to the May Board and TAC meeting.
Thank you for that, Sam. I ask Shane that every day. What corners are we cutting? Just kidding. Thank you for that, Sam. Okay, let's move on down to the approval of our minutes. Board members, is there a motion to approve our minutes?
I'll motion to approve the minutes.
Do we have a second?
I will second.
Great, we have a motion to approve by Councilmember Sweet and a second by Mr. Williams. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say nay. That motion carries. Thank you. That brings us down to our discussion items, which discussion item 5 is a consideration of an appointment to the Metro Plan Executive Board. Staff, is there any presentation or discussion on your part?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. And for those attending on behalf of the TAC, this item will be brief. With Steve Peru's departure from his position at CCC and his related departure from our board of directors, we have a vacant seat on the Metro Plan Executive Board. Steve was serving in that position. As discussed in the staff report, the desire is to really replace that seat with either a CCC or NAU board member in light of the number of elected officials already serving on Metro Plan's board on behalf of the city of Flagstaff and Coconino County. So with that, we would be seeking a nomination and appointment to that Metro Plan seat today.
Great, thank you. And Mr. Okolai, I am tempted to nominate you. Before I do that, are there any comments that you'd like to share? Would you be open to being our representative?
Yes.
Awesome. So I would like to nominate Mr. Okolai to be our let's see, our appointment to the Metro Plan Executive Board. Board members, any comments or concerns or discussion? Any other nominations? Okay. Without seeing any, all those in favor of nominating Dan to the board, say aye.
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 All those opposed? That motion carries. Congratulations and thank you, Dan. That brings us down to item 6, which is consider and approve the third FY 2021 budget revision.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Lori Batiste, and I'm the Management Services Director for Mountain Line. And, oh, there it is. And so staff is requesting the Board of Directors approve the third fiscal year 2021 budget revision for a total change not to exceed $26,959. This makes the changes authorized effective October 1st and October 1st of 2020 and January 1st of 2021, both retroactive to July 1st of 2020. The revision moves capacity from contingency to wages and employee-related expenses. Next slide, please. Thank you. As a reminder, in June, the board adopted budget included implementation of the compensation plan for hourly employees and a 1% COLA on July 1st for exempt staff, with remainder of the compensation plan for exempt staff budgeted in contingency. Board approval of the budget included a requirement that implementation of the remainder of the compensation plan for exempt staff is contingent upon additional board action to approve the budget revision. The pending increases can only be approved if revenues, continue to perform at or above the projections presented with the budget request. Next slide, please. So the wording that we had in there was that the transit tax must provide revenues higher than projected in the April 2020 update, and the annual projection increases must be at least 1% as measured by the end of the first quarter. Staff affected by the delay will then be eligible for 50% of the identified compensation plan adjustment effective with the first pay period following the end of the measured quarter. The table below demonstrates the proposed delay in action available this past fiscal year, with action 3 being what's for consideration today. Next slide, please. As reported during the budget process, it was anticipated that a recession due to COVID-19 would have a total impact of reducing the fund balance by more than $1 million over 5 years. We've now completed the third quarter for the fiscal year and received updated transit tax revenue projections from the city of Flagstaff. As illustrated, when comparing current transit tax projections to the COVID recession projections, fiscal year 20 was 10.9% higher. Fiscal year 2021 is 15.1% higher. And over the next 5 years, the total was 14.5% higher than the COVID recession projection. These changes do support the recommended action of increasing exempt staff wages by 50% of the identified compensation study change effective as of January 1st, 2021. And you can go to the next slide, please. And next one, sorry. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you so much. Board members, TAC members, any comments, questions, concerns? And if there aren't any, staff is requesting that the Board of Directors approve the fiscal year 2021 budget revision with this change. Board members, is there a motion?
I would like to motion that we approve the third fiscal year 2021 budget revision.
Thank you for that. Is there a second?
I will second.
Great. We have a motion from Board Member Sweet and a second by Mr. Williams. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. That motion carries. Thank you. That brings us down to item number 7 on our agenda, which is to consider the fiscal year 2022 budget. All right, Ms. Patrice.
Good morning again, Lori Batiste. Today, I will be presenting information on current revenues and projections, the fund balance, financial plan state sustainability, and the balance of the fiscal year 2022 expenditure budget. Last month in April, the workforce budget was presented, so I will not be focusing on those line items. However, questions can be addressed if there are any that have arisen since that meeting. Next slide, please. So we have 5 revenue sources, FTA or federal, city, NAU, county, and fairs. And projections for each of these are slightly different. So for federal, it's generally flat. We've historically had a 2.5% increase per year. And we do calculate our federal funding based on our annual appropriations. And then also we look at the history of cash flow need versus appropriation dates. So appropriation is November to May of the local fiscal year. And for the city, they're the fiscal agent. So they collect, track, and project the transit tax. And for NAU and county, we actually don't project or track those revenues. And for our fares, the projection is based off of ridership growth. And we take that and multiply it by the prior year average fare passenger. And that includes all fares, whether cash or smart cards or our passes for all of our riders. And so I do want to pause here for a moment and just talk about a one-time donation from McGrath Real Estate Partners, and that's in relation to the EcoPass agreement for 5 years of transit passes that was required by the city. In that agreement, McGrath volunteered to make a one-time donation of 2 times their first year pass purchase, and we estimated that to be about $19,000. That donation would be used for our existing discount day pass program to expand the passes available to current or to participating human service agencies. The donation is not included in our fiscal year 2022 budget since we don't know when the residential development will open. But this project or the donation has come up, and it will be a revenue source eventually, and part of our fare revenues as we budget those in the future. So I just wanted to make sure that I spoke to that in case anybody had any questions about that at all. So I'll just pause there for a moment and just check in and see if anybody has questions so far.
Any questions? Don't all jump in at once.
I have a question.
Please, thank you.
So, so are the McGraths, are they providing a donation as well as requiring residents to have a bus pass?
So McGrath is, they're the ones that are providing the donation. And then I'm sorry, did you ask if they are requiring their residents to have a bus pass in addition?
I thought I heard that you said the city was requiring them to provide residential passes for those living there. Did I miss?
No, yes.
Okay.
Right. The city was requiring it, not Kate or Heather could confirm. I don't believe McGrath is necessarily requiring their residents to, I think they're providing them to their residents.
Right.
With the donation.
So if I could clarify, Member Jackson, the City of Flagstaff, as part of the development agreement with McGrath for their property development, required them to provide Eco Pass program bus passes for every bed that is to be part of their development. McGrath took it one step further and offered the donation. It is a one-time donation that was made on behalf of McGrath. It was not required by the city. The city required them to offer the Eco Pass program and purchase that from us for 5 years.
Awesome. Thank you for clarifying. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Heather.
Thank you, Committee Member Jackson. Great question. Other questions or comments? Okay.
Okay. Next slide, please. So moving into expenses. So for expenses, we began with a base budget of last year or the prior year's approved budget. And then we do consider all increase requests. These include growth of expenses for route expansion. It could also be for inflation or general use of items. We do review travel as an increment. The goal of this is to provide a similar opportunity for all of our employees for growth and development. And so we do require our employees to plan for their conferences or education, and then of course the associated cost for that. And then we also evaluate all capital and one-time requests. We identify the transit benefit, the funding source, any operational impacts, and always look at the timing to ensure that expenses are budgeted in the correct periods. Next slide, please. So for our partner requests, we design and submit budget requests to our partners each year. The city's request is calculated as our last funding source needed to balance our revenue and expenses. And it's also necessary to help us make sure we have our local match for our grants. Any used request is set per our IGA, and the change year over year is from the consumer price index for all urban consumers. And the county is calculated as, for just the county programs, it's the last funding source for balancing our revenues and expenses. And for the past about 4 to 5 years, that has remained flat. So there hasn't been any change for the county. Next slide, please. So for our financial plan, we first update all of our revenues as necessary. We try to get the updated transit tax projections as they're available from the city, and we update our federal funding for awards and any announced appropriation. We also project our fares and contracts based on prior year actual revenue and future year ridership targets. We then compare our drafted budget to the financial plan to evaluate the change in our budget versus the plan. The financial plan assumes 2% growth in all costs year over year. And it includes a 10-year capital outlook. And then, of course, any approved compensation strategy is included. And last, we evaluate the fund balance in the financial plan, and that's based on revenue information as well as the draft budget, and that just lets us see the impact on our fund balance. Per our financial management policy, we must maintain a fund balance that supports current service levels, supports asset management and preventative maintenance, provides for all committed local match for grants, provides for capital replacement of vehicles and assets, and includes a 10% operations fund balance. Next slide, please. Thank you. So here is our overall fiscal year 2021 and 2022 budgets. Overall, operating increased slightly by about 5%, and that's mainly due to salaries and benefits, as covered last month. Over this past year, we did have fuel savings as we ran 4 buses instead of 5 on Route 10. But that was then offset by unexpected costs for cleaning or additional expenses and supplies for COVID. Otherwise, the remaining operations increase was really driven by an increase in our personal liability insurance, legal and legislative liaison costs. And next slide, please. And so this also is our same fiscal year 2022 budget request, but looking at it by program. And so our bus program had a slight increase by 8%, and that was mostly in salaries and benefits, with about 100,000 in operating. And then paratransit, that decrease was 24%, and that was almost entirely due actually to salaries and benefits. So for fiscal year 2022, we did change the way that we split our operators. In past, we had primarily had bus operators and paratransit operators, and some that maybe did both. And so we coded them accordingly to each program. And for going into fiscal year 2022, for this budget, we are splitting all operators the same. And so hopefully being able to even out as people move around, if there's a different need in each program. So that's why there was such a large increase in paratransit, and then, like I said, offset in a little bit in bus, as well as some operating there. But and then the change in planning was primarily due to salaries and benefits as well. So that was a large part of the changes that we had in this year's budget. And next slide, please. Okay, so our partner budgets have all been submitted, and we do anticipate having all of them approved. And for our federal sources, in particular, we do include funds that are not yet awarded, but the understanding is that projects cannot move forward and no costs can be incurred if those funds aren't awarded. The budget does create capacity needed if projects are awarded though. So for our federal funding, we did maintain our fiscal year 2020 appropriation for 5307 and STIC, which is small transit intensive cities. And the city has provided a projection of transit tax through fiscal year 2027. And based on the projected revenues, the total impact is estimated to be an increase of $2.4 million over 5 years. And our fare projection is has a slight increase for ridership, but a very small amount. We're just starting to see some year-over-year increases, so it's good news. And next slide. So this just shows fiscal year 21 and 2022 budget split out for operating and our transit tax. And so overall, our budget message is the 5% increase in operating, primarily being due to the salaries and benefits, and then the increase that in our transit tax, and that came out to about 30%. And that's all I have for that slide. Sorry. Next slide, please. Okay. So this is for our different capital. And so for okay, sorry, I just want to make sure I was in the right place. For our buses, we had 2 electric buses that contributed to the large change year over year, as well as a joint bus storage facility on the NAU campus. And in our vans, we had a carryover that this fiscal year 2021 we've since gotten those vans. And for our capitalized repairs and rehab, that was mostly just a change in our carryovers from fiscal year to fiscal year. And for it, just kind of in miscellaneous, excuse me, we have for our CASPAR master plan, that's included in there this year, as well as computer and service replacements. And in route construction, we have our BRT carryover. That's primarily in there. Next slide, please. So for our financial plan, okay. I apologize. So for the outlook, I have through 2030 on this slide, but I think I failed to update that to 2027. So we'll see that on the next slide. But otherwise, for our revenues for the city, it's generally about 5 years out. We do update that 2 times per year, and we base that off of a 2% increase for inflation. And that's also used for years beyond the city's projection that they provide us. And for federal, that's updated with our annual appropriation. And then we generally keep it at that 2.5% growth. And for our fares, it's based off of our ridership target and the historical average fare per passenger. For O&M, we generally look at our current year actuals, and we do update those 2 times per year, generally at the half year mark, and then again at year end. And that cost growth is projected at 2% for CPI. And for capital, it's based on our capital plan. It does have reoccurring rehab and refurbishment funds. And for the bus replacement, that's pre-funded in our plan. And it sets aside local match that will be necessary to replace a vehicle at the end of its life. And the next slide, please. I think this is our last slide. So this is our fund balance from our financial plan. And so like I said, this goes out to 2027, not 2030. And you'll see really starting for the fiscal year 2022, we stay pretty constant at about that 10 million mark. And this is really due to we're trying to build up our balance until we make a decision about electric fleet, about purchasing as well as operating an electric fleet. And so we've been hesitant to program any other service changes or expansions. So until we can review or go through the 5-year plan process and determine if there are excess funds that might support expanded services. And so, yeah, I guess those are all the notes I have on that. So, and I'm pretty sure that's the last slide. Can you go to the next slide, please? That is the last slide. So, at this time, we don't have a recommendation. We're just trying to share this update, and we will be coming back in June requesting approval of our budget. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Batiste, so much for your presentation. Board members, TAC members, any questions or comments about fiscal year 2022 budget? I saw someone raise their hand. Who was that? Chair Stam.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you, Lori, for the presentation. Lots of information, and so I apologize if I missed it. If you can go back, that compared FY21 to FY22, specifically looking at, I think it was under fares. I want to say it went from 6 million to 2 million, or 4 million to 2 million, and I missed. Keep going. Keep going. Whoa. It's all the date. It's the numbers, so maybe it's forward a little bit. But I could have sworn it looked like there was a significant decrease, and I want to say it was under fares. Yes, right there. Yeah. Just reading it. What did I'm sure you said it, and I might have missed it.
No, I apologize, Erin, for any confusion. So when I was talking about our fares only increasing slightly, I was talking about our just the base of our fares. Sorry, in this 6.2 and 2.7 includes also not just the fares that we take in from our passengers, from the customers on the bus. So that's the disconnect there. I'm sorry.
It's just the huge difference. It's a decrease whereas, you know, I was just surprised by the significant decrease from FY21 to FY22. It's a $4 million decrease, and that seemed, I don't know what I was missing.
Mr. Chair, if I could, I might be able to help. So the fares is also a slash to NAU. And so this is in part because of how the federal government treats the money that NAU pays us. We lump them together. And so remember, in 2021 and again in 2022, we have the bus facility that we are working on jointly with NAU. And so this is that capital investment that NAU may bring to the table to match that federal grant. And the project was 25 million in 2021, and it's 5 million in 2022. And so that change has to do with that project. So
thank you.
We can make that more clear. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Thanks for the question, Erin.
Yes, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Give it just another half minute for anyone to think of anything. Don't make me start calling on people. No, I thought that was a great presentation. I really appreciate it. I don't have any questions, and I'm not seeing any other questions. Oh, did I hear someone? Okay, last call. All right, let's move on down to the next item, which is item number 8, which is review the 2020-2025 strategic plan. And the board may provide direction, but there is no recommendation from staff at this time.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board, and members of our Transit Advisory Committee. This presentation is just a quick reminder on the 2020 to 2025 strategic plan. As we go into our 5-year plan, we wanted you to be aware of the goals that were set in that adopted plan back in November of 2019, as it still provides framework for how we are approaching our 5-year plan. The goals we hope to maintain as we finish up that 5-year plan, with the objectives and or the task being updated. So with that, we'll briefly just go through the goals. Next slide. Our first goal is to maintain service excellence. And so we're built on that culture of excellence and innovation. We heard those words a couple times earlier this morning. And the objectives that we've tied to this goal are really about maintaining that excellence in our community, from cleaning the buses and maintaining our facilities, but also in ensuring customers have an excellent experience. Next slide. Our second goal is to remain good stewards of the resources that we have. Transit is a public investment, both for our local tax dollars as well as the federal funding that we receive. And so we are striving to demonstrate the pride that we have in our system and maintain our facilities and buses and continue not just for their useful life, but to extend those useful life where possible. Next slide. Goal 3 of our strategic plan is investing in the Mountain Line workforce. This goal really focuses on the employees that are the backbone of everything that we do here. So it's everything from pay and pay-related programs to work-life balance and development, and also the culture that we have here. And so that goal has several different objectives underneath it, which we continue to strive to accomplish. Next slide. Goal 4 is the enhanced safety culture. This really began with the adoption of our agency safety plan that was mandated by the Federal Transit Administration, but really is capturing all of the different safety initiatives that we apply here to put safety first in everything that we do. Next slide. Goal 5 is about community engagement. So it is important that the community know who we are and what we do. They also need to understand the connections that are important that we make possible in our community. So our community engagement allows us to be in front of those various audiences. Next slide. And the last goal of our strategic plan is about fiscal responsibility. This goal really focused on how do we use the funding that we have and how do we diversify it. So some of the objectives under here were about private partnerships and the things that we've looked at, like with Sky Cottages for funding a route, as well as the Downtown Connection Center. And we'll continue to work towards diversifying this funding. So again, you have this in your packet attached to the staff report. It is just meant to be a reminder as we go into the next part of our meeting today, which is really focused on the planning of the 5-year plan, or Flagstaff in Motion. And I wanted you just to have a brief moment to review these 6 goals. That's everything that I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. That is great. Any comments or questions about the goals? All right, not seeing anyone. Mr. Milback, did you have something to add?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to say how much I appreciate the clarity of these goals that have been put together, in the past couple of years, and really support them. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you for weighing in. Very good. Any other comments or questions? Going once, going twice. All right, thank you. Let's move on to the next agenda item, which I think is the big reason why we're all here. So I'm very excited about this next agenda item. This is the Flagstaff in Motion, agenda item number 9, a community transit plan. And this is going to be an interactive discussion and with breakout rooms. So buckle up. But Busy, you want to take it away?
Yes. Thank you, Director Shimoni. And I apologize, there's not a slide in here, but we did have a 5-minute break planned. So I did want to give everybody a little break, 5 minutes. If we could come back just before 10, that would be wonderful. And then we're ready to dive into the Flagstaff in Motion portion of the presentation. So please just walk around, get some a beverage, whatever you need in the next 5 minutes, and we'll meet back here. Thank you.
Great. Let's be back at 9:59. Thank you, Izzy.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Yeah, so just a heads up that I have a hard stop at 11:30. I'm sorry.
Okay, thanks for letting me know. Thank you.
Okay, we are at 9:59. I'm just checking in, hoping people are rejoining here. And Rhonda, if you could go to the next slide, please. And I'm going to look through. You're welcome to keep your camera on, off. As we go through, I'm going to make sure that I have a few critical people that have joined. Excellent, great. Okay, well, I will get started. I want to keep us on time. And the remaining of this meeting will be spent on the region's transit plan, Flagstaff in Motion. So you can see the logo brand here on the screen. And the purpose of this plan is, or the purpose of today, sorry, is to share information with you all and also receive direction to guide this plan's development. Throughout the next couple of hours, we will have many poll questions that will pop up on your screen. I encourage only board and TAC to respond to those poll questions, since you all are helping guide this plan for us. So staff and legal and AECOM who has joined us, please just refrain, it's gonna be hard. And we are joined by AECOM consultant team members Darren Lozano, Monica Hernandez, and Andrew Iddickson. And we will be joined by Fred Solop from Global Local Visions shortly, who all will be presenting in addition to Mountain Line staff today. And we have lots to cover, but I welcome questions throughout the presentation. I'll be the timekeeper, so if we start to get too deep into a topic, I'll just kind of remind us to, you know, we have many more meetings to talk about all of this. We just want to hear some very critical decisions from the board and TAC today. And I just want to give you a heads up, the next break will be about 11:20, just before we navigate into the breakout session. So if you need to excuse yourself, of course, please do so. Just wanted to let you know. Next slide, please, Rhonda. So why have a transit plan? First, I want to say that the past two transit plans that Mountain Line conducted have looked at the corridors where Flagstaff Transit is serving and have recommended staying there as it is best for ridership potential. So staff do not believe that a system redesign is needed and recommend the current system should remain in place. This plan is more intended to look at how we meet additional transit needs now and those on the horizon. And once a plan is in place, it guides Mountain Line staff on transit improvements over the next 5 years and helps us fulfill our IGA responsibilities, including the board determining an appropriate system to serve the public transportation needs identified in the plan and the means to finance the system, and also providing Mountain Line with the sole authority for designing, operating, and maintaining the bus system. And frequently this comes up in our comments to developments to accommodate transit. So we take our plan and try to implement it piece by piece or in larger portions as funding is available and opportunities arise. And staff believe a transit plan update is needed for many reasons. If no additional funding is received, cost inflation and traffic forecasts will impede Mountain Line's ability to simply maintain service. Also, demand for transit service continues to increase, especially in areas within city limits, but beyond the transit watershed. And these changes and challenges include new development, the hospital moving to Fort Tuthill, confirming the bus rapid transit route, which we've put on pause, but definitely still very much interested in seeing come to reality. And with all of these needs, what can we realistically pass in a tax? So we have a lot of transit need, but it all costs money, and what is acceptable to the public. Another reason is that from an integrated transportation system perspective, staff need to understand how the fixed route transit system, so the buses that you probably see all the time running on their routes, that how can that be optimized with walking, biking, and on-demand microtransit? our taxi vouchers, paratransit, and van pool mobility options. It's a holistic transportation landscape, and how do we optimize fixed route in the most cost-efficient ways. COVID-19 also drew attention to some isolated transit-dependent groups that lack quality access to the existing system. And we feel we need to explore options to ensure transit is available to our vulnerable community members. Another reason is that additional service and a potential transition to battery electric buses, which was approved in January of this year, will require additional funding. Priorities for service and capital enhancements need to be refined in these scenarios. And finally, should the board seek a tax question in 2022, timing is optimal to engage the public and update the plan throughout this year and use this effort as a launch pad into a ballot question. Next slide, please, Rhonda. Excellent. So here's our first poll. And I am going to launch it. Please let me know if you do not see it. It should pop up on your screen now. Again, I only want board directors and TAC members to please fill that out. And I'll give you a couple seconds here. So the question is, on a scale of 0 to 5, how important do you think transit is to the Flagstaff community? 0, not at all important, through 5, very important.
Does this also include alternates?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
And can I ask a question? This is Chris.
Please.
To the Flagstaff community. Do you mean the Flagstaff community members? Like, how important do I think it is to the Flagstaff community members? Or do you think the community at large in growing a sustainable community?
I do think both. I think transit has a critical role to play in both of those.
Izzy, this is Shane. I think I really appreciate Christopher's question for clarity, because as I'm looking at this, that can go either way. If you're asking us to answer this question representing the community at large, you know, each member of our community, the 75,000 people that live, work, and play here, and the many more on top of that come and visit Flagstaff, that's one thing. If you're talking about how important transit is to the future of our community, that's another thing. And so I really appreciate Christopher's question to clarify. Thank you.
Okay, I would absolutely say then members, community members.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Shane, for articulating it like that.
Okay, so I see 11 respondents. I'm looking for a couple more. I had counted about 13, I think. There's another one, and there's another one. Thank you so much. So I am ending the polling, and I am sharing the results. And you should see the results on your screen now. And we do have a majority considering it very important at 46%, followed by important at 4, 38%, and 3, important at 15%. So thank you for that. I'm going to stop sharing these results. And next slide, please, Rhonda. Next slide, Rhonda, please.
Izzy, are we going to have a chance to engage on the outcomes of these polls, each specific poll?
Absolutely. Do you have a comment?
Well, I didn't know. I don't want to get you off of your momentum here. So I'm willing. I just didn't want to take it out of queue. So we can do it whenever. I just wanted to know if there was a chance for us to talk about it after everything's said and done. Thanks.
As timekeeper, we have approximately 3 minutes that we are welcome to discuss this. If anybody has comments at this time, I welcome those. And throughout the polls, absolutely. You have questions, comments on your results.
Well, I guess if you could go back to the results of that poll, I do have a comment, or maybe a question. I want to learn the perspective better of folks that responded in number 5, because when you clarified the question being, okay, as members of the community, how important is transit? In my mind, and I'll say it, I did not answer 5 because if we answered 5, then we would not have the buses to supply the demand. And that's why, I mean, we would have overwhelming uses of transit if the answer to the question was number 5. We just wouldn't be able to meet the supply, or we wouldn't be able to meet the demand, which is why I didn't score number 5. And so I guess I would like at some point, maybe it's not today or maybe it is, to better understand that perspective. Thank you.
Izzy, I can comment. I was not a 5, but when I answered the question, while I personally will not ride transit because I live in Kachina, it's still important to me as a community member that it is there, that people can use it, because for those that can't, it still helps to improve transit throughout the city of Flagstaff. So I guess I wasn't thinking of it important to members to use transit, but important to the community so that as a collective group, those that can use it do, and that helps to mitigate other transit challenges for those that don't maybe have that option. So that's how I answered it, which I think is a little bit different than it sounds like from Shane's perspective. It was, if everybody was a 5, everybody would be using it. I wasn't assuming everybody would use it, but it was still important for the greater good of the community.
Thank you, Aaron. That helps me. Thanks.
I appreciate that discussion. That's really helpful perspectives, and thank you for those questions and comments.
Jeff, did you want to jump in?
Sure. I just want to say I scored it very important. I would have scored it 6 if that was an option. As the system exists now, we have a very expensive community. It's only getting more so for people who need to get to work and school and just live their lives. Being able to move by transit is so important. We have people who can ride by choice and only get by with 1 car instead of 2, which is very important. And that's just today. And if we look to the future of wanting to have a more sustainable community with far less emissions and a higher quality of life without our streets clogged with traffic, the opportunity for transit is even greater or more important.
Thanks for that. And I'll just piggyback on that. And I also scored this a 5 because if we are to want to meet our climate goals and be just the community that we can be, we need to better move our people around Flagstaff, and not through cars, but through buses and shared transportation and all sorts of things. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but I guess that's why I scored it a 5. Is I think that Mountain Line and the service we're providing plays such a huge role in the goals of the city and the community at large. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I jump in, please?
Of course.
I really, really appreciate these responses. But to me, that gets to how important, gets back to Christopher's clarification earlier on. And that is, are we scoring this question thinking about how important transit is to the future of Flagstaff, or how important it is to the people that live here today, 75,000 people? And so as I hear Jeff respond, and as I hear you, Mr. Chair, respond, it's more thinking about how important transit is to the future of our community. And if that was the question, I would have scored it a 10, right? But I'm not, I specifically didn't score a 5 because I thought that there's much more out there that we need to do in terms of improving the use of our transit in our community. And that's why I did not score it a 5, because I was answering the question specific to how important is transit in the minds of our 75,000 people that live here today. And so I just wanted to make that clarification, but this has been a very, very enlightening discussion. Thank you. And I'm sorry, it's busy if it took us over our timeline.
Perfect timing. No, this is great discussion. I agree. Thank you, everyone. And I can't see hands or anything, but are we good to move on?
I believe so. Chair Stam, did you still have something to add, or your hand still raised?
No, that's just me not putting my hand down. Sorry, I'll do it right now. Thank you,
Good,
Adam.
it's good to stretch, you know.
Yeah.
Thank you, Busy. Keep going. Unless
Thank
there's
you
any
all.
other comments. Yep.
Excellent. Great. And I'll pass it over to Kate.
Thank you. You guys all just kicked off the section I'm going to talk about really well for me with that conversation. So why does transit matter? Just wanting to set the stage a little bit as we move forward for today. And I'll talk about the different items that you see on the screen in front of you. So next slide, Rhonda, please. So the first one is for equity reasons. And the two bullet points that you actually have on the slide in front of you are items out of the council's goals themselves to have an inclusive and engaged community and to advance social justice and equity. And I don't have the exact stat, but I often hear from Martin and Dave Wessel, a number around 30% of our community members don't drive. Either they can't drive because they have a disability, they never learned to drive, they can't afford to drive, maybe they're too young to drive, but still have places to go. Maybe they're too old to drive anymore. So that is a lot of people in our community who all still have places to go, even if they fall into those categories. And so there is this big equity component. The map in front of you is the route network overlaid with Title VI communities. And I think it's Title VI and minority. And the darker the color, the more those populations exist. And if you don't know Title VI, that it tends to be the low income and minority populations that we're considering there. So next slide. Also, why does transit matter? Because of climate action, as we just heard Director Shimoni state about wanting to meet our future goals. The city does have a climate emergency that they've declared with the goal to be carbon neutral by 2030. And that requires a 50% reduction in vehicle miles traveled. If you look at the graphic that's on the screen, that's from the CAP plan, the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. And the yellow is the transportation sector. And so you can see it's a huge piece of the pie. If you consider powering buildings, and then car emissions are number 1 and 2. And so how can Mountain Line or transit play a role in meeting those climate action goals? Next slide. Affordability. We also have a declared housing emergency, right? In this town, as we just heard how unaffordable things are. And I think it's only gotten exponentially worse in the past year. Are we able to impact the ability of people to choose to live in Flagstaff through the transit system? Because housing plus transit is what a lot of people really consider the true measure of affordability. It's not just housing, it's not just transit, it's those two major costs together. The slide in front of you with the gray and pink and yellow, that is from the housing section of the city. The top slide, the yellow bar there is the bar of how much housing prices have increased year over year. And you can see it's off the charts at this point. So we're not getting a lot of impact there. Is there a way that we can have an impact through the transit side or the transportation side of the affordability equation? The other graph that you see in front of you just is a general graphic nationwide about housing costs plus transportation costs and how you can see how much of a budget those two pieces of people's expenses take up. So next slide. Economic vitality, we also play a critical role in getting people to jobs and education, setting up the future workforce. We've done many surveys of riders. 68% say that Mountain Line is their only form of transportation. 47% of riders are going to work and 20% are future workforce going to school. So we are helping with economic mobility. We tend to have great support from all the economic development groups within town because they understand that connection that Mountain Line is bringing in terms of access to business and jobs and getting employees where they need to go and having employees always show up because we're reliable versus car breakdowns, et cetera. So we play a key role there as well. Next slide. And then land use. So we have limited land. This impacts the affordability conversation that we have in town. We always know we're trying not to sprawl as a community, but we still want many things. And so how do we fit them all into the space that we have? when we're surrounded by national forest. Cars take up space. They take up space for parking lots. They take up space for roadways. They take up space in people's own yards for driveways. And there is a difference in how much space we can take up if people can make a shift to buses. So you see the graphic with the 40 by car, 40 by bus, 40 by bike, and that's meant to illustrate the difference in how much space moving 40 people can take if you consider other modes. And then the vertical graphic on the right is actually a screenshot of the Milton corridor. And if you really take a minute to look at it, you can see just how much space we've devoted to cars along the Milton corridor. It's definitely the #1 land use that I see when I look at this map. I see giant parking lots, I see roads everywhere. And again, if we can think creatively about how to move people, could we be reallocating space in our community to housing or other economic development purposes? And allowing private development also to do more with the limited land that they have, because they don't have to dedicate so much to the movement of vehicles or the parking of vehicles. Next slide. All right, next poll, busy. So this one is the top 3 reasons why transit is important. So you do get to pick a couple here, multiple choice. And again, we're looking for the same people to vote.
Yes, thank you, Kate. And I'll just read the question and the answers that are available to you. So please select the top 3 reasons why you think transit is important to the Flagstaff community. And option 1, improve quality of life. 2, helps bridge equity and affordability gaps. 3, helps ensure a more sustainable future. 4, stimulates and supports economic vitality. 5, reduce traffic congestion. And 6, other. So if you have something that isn't captured here, please select other, and we'd love to talk about it. And about half the people have voted.
I'm just wondering why there wasn't all the above option 2.
Oh, yep, that would have been a good one. How about that could be your other, all of the above maybe? Or you can select all of them if you would like. We can't limit you.
Oh, that would break the rules, Busy.
It would. Okay, a couple more people. Perfect. Get closer. Okay, and I'm going to end the poll and share the results here. So it looks like our #1 reason based on board and TAC responses is to help ensure a more sustainable future at 83%. And then tied for second is bridging equity and affordability gaps and reducing traffic congestion. Third, improving quality of life at 33%. And then 4th, stimulates and supports economic vitality. Any discussion, comments on this from members and directors?
This is Josh, if I could just weigh in for a second.
Yes.
So one of my responses was improves quality of life, because, you know, I think that is sort of a catch-all. You know, that's sort of one of all of the above, you know, just coming from Southern California, where traffic congestion was definitely impacting my quality of life. I think there's a direct impact there. So just thought it was sort of just an interesting point, I thought.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing.
Any other comments?
I just think it's really interesting, you know, to me, what comes to my mind is perspective, right? Your own personal experience and perspective, and, you know, whether it's congestion or if it's an equity thing. I think a lot of times we look at these things through our own perspectives. And so it's just interesting to see this poll.
I agree. Okay, thank you for everybody's feedback. I'm going to stop sharing the results. And Rhonda, next slide, please. And I believe Heather Dalmolin is up.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about our revenues and expenditures, and Lori presented the 2022 budget and the financial fund balance to help give you a picture of that. So right now within our money, our financial situation, really what we have is planned out. Lori did reveal that we do have some money that we consider what to do, but what we're seeing is the demand is continuing, especially in those areas that we don't serve, and our current transportation tax is really fixed. It doesn't allow for us to look at any new service areas until we determine what we can do with some of that surplus funding. So additional funding is needed for any new service that we do determine that we want to come up with. And then we've started to ask the question if should we be looking at reallocating the funds that we have to change our service or to meet some of these demands. Next slide.
Busy, I can take it from here. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee and members of the board. Again, my name is Darren Lozano. I am with AECOM, and I am the project manager for the transit plan update. And what I'd like to do is introduce Andrew Iddickson, who has led several transit plans throughout the country, and he's going to be kind of our transit scenario development lead. But to kind of lead into this item here is we know a lot of work has been done by Mountain Line, working through the community, through the previous transit plan. But as you just heard, part of our task is to develop different scenarios, looking at the different transit service options and how do those pair with funding. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Andrew to talk about kind of how we plan to approach this specific topic. Andrew?
Great, thanks, Darren. Hello, everybody. Yeah, so go through some of these key factors that we're looking at as we give another relook at transit. You guys have done a lot of really good studies in the past and using the framework from your 2017 study, but knowing how Flagstaff has grown and how the community has changed, just giving another look at it and seeing some areas where potential improvements could be. So looking at some key factors, the top two you see there, geographic, socioeconomic, that's really looking at the market analysis and just understanding the demographics and how the services are provided today, and if there are any gaps that are there and needed, and thinking about equity, which is something that we'll be touching on throughout this presentation, and doing a deep dive there and really kind of understanding, areas of where accessibility to a vehicle and poverty and senior populations, youth populations, and so forth, and making sure that we look at transit through those lenses and focusing on demographics in the market as well. Connections is really looking at the connectivity of the service. Currently, you provide a pulse at the DCC, which works well, and sort of looking at that and the future of the pulse and how that operates and how the varying routes connect to one another and create a complete network for the community. Next is not all transit is the same, and really just thinking about the trade-off, and I know that this will be discussed in detail later, but the common trade-off of frequency or ridership versus coverage. And I think, if we had done this plan 5-10 years ago, we wouldn't have the same resources that we have today with technology and emerging tools that can be applied, and really look at ways of focusing on that frequent network, or in your case, the permanent network, but also making sure that there's some kind of coverage for vulnerable communities and lifeline services that oftentimes may not be along a primary corridor or the permanent network. And so making sure to have that balance of frequency and ridership, but also equity and lifeline services. So I know that microtransit will be talked about in a little bit, and that's really the focus. And things that we've been doing in other communities in Dallas and Detroit, and even in smaller communities like Lubbock and Topeka is understanding, the sort of right-sized approach of the services, and that in having these new things such as mobility as a service and microtransit, and right-sizing it to the market that it serves, and complementing the higher frequency services and feeding into that. So that's a real key as we look forward and look at the services moving forward. And then also thinking about, and one other item I wanted to touch on is having some of this technologies now also looking at ways of commingling services. And so commingling of paratransit and microtransit together can provide some new efficiencies of service. And so I believe Mountain Line's even looked at some of those things in the past, and those are really key as we look at productivity measures such as subsidy per passenger and passengers per hour and so forth. The last item is capital investment. Thinking about bus stop amenities and bus stops and accessibility to bus stops and sidewalks, but also thinking, it was covered earlier, greener technologies for fixed route transit. So that could mean electrification of buses and automated buses as well. And so thinking about the investments for that. Next slide. So 4 basic indicators of high ridership potential that we look at when we think about the high frequency services: density, population employment density, but also density of transit generators or attractors along the corridor. Fixed route transit loves density, and they do well together. So anytime that you have a dense corridor, transit most often does really well. And you can see the 2 images here of the rooftops and where transit is operating and how that looks. And you can just imagine for ridership purposes how that works. Linear service, straight lines, this is really key and something that we see a lot more of in other areas than I'm seeing when I look at your route today, are circuitous one-way loops going into neighborhoods and so forth. Not a whole lot of that in Flagstaff, which is great. Although there's some things that aren't necessarily just straight lines, but overall not a big issue like it can be in some places. And so, making sure this is really key too to attracting new riders. This is one of those improvements that can be made, and part of your plans too, that not only does it make a trip higher quality for current riders and existing riders, but it's something that is attractive to new riders too, having that straight, fast trip that's not meandering into other areas. And really that's where microtransit kind of play to take over some of those types of trips. Walkability, this is a good example of a quarter-mile buffer is not necessarily a true quarter-mile buffer unless the pedestrian network is something that works and not fragmented in different ways. So making sure that bus stops and bus facilities are accessible and walkable, it makes it more attractive. And then lastly, proximity to the transit generators and activity centers, and making sure that these sorts of things are on the way and that transit is serving those. Next slide. Density, again, key indicator for transit. It's not the only thing that drives transit, but an important part of transit. So here you're seeing population and employment density together. And so the darker the purple, the greater density of the 2 metrics together. And so just looking at this from a high level, when you see lines on a map, Mountain Line is providing service to all the areas that have the darker colors, that are the densest. Something that we'll look at is the lines match up, but do the times of day match up? Do the left turns are safe enough and meet into the right places? And so kind of just digging a little bit deeper into the information, the data, as well as the routes. And it's more than just lines on the map, but how they interact with the community as well. And then next slide. And then wanted to just hit home on the walkability and the pedestrian access. This is a map that, what I like about this map is oftentimes you see these walkability buffers and it's really a quarter-mile buffer, but it's a buffer around the routes themselves. This map is looking at the bus stops, which really is more meaningful to riders and to the community, and seeing that buffer. And this is a quarter-mile buffer. And for some people, a half-mile is acceptable level. A distance to travel and to walk to a bus, and depending on the level of service, and oftentimes higher frequency services, people will walk a little bit further to. But this shows, how transit is reaching into the community, and more than just the routes and the maps and the stops, but also, how people can interact and get to the service and tie into it. And again, as a discussion on microtransit comes up later in this presentation, some of these areas that may have lower density and but still need those sort of services can provide that coverage oftentimes in a more efficient way.
Thank you, Andrew. That was great. Anything else from you?
That's it. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you. Next slide, please, Rhonda. I think we have a couple polls. Excellent. I'm launching a poll here. So what is the maximum amount of time you would be willing to wait for the next bus? So we're talking about frequency, right? And these amounts of time reflect Mountain Line services. So on our highest frequency route, Route 10, you're going to be waiting 8 minutes for a bus. You know, you're standing there. Oh man, I just saw the last one come. I didn't get out of my house quick enough. The next one's right around the corner practically. 8 minutes is really awesome. Whereas on the other end of the spectrum, we have Route 5 at 60 minutes. So you miss that bus. I mean, that's really affecting your life. So really just trying to understand frequency and what might work for you individually. So just kind of reflecting on realistically, how long are you going to wait? If you're taking the bus, frequency is critical.
Oh man, Busy, this is a tough one. This is a really tough question. I'm telling you.
What's your gut answer?
I wouldn't wait. You asked me what my gut answer is, and I appreciate that because usually that's the answer you need to provide to be completely honest and have this be beneficial. But it's not how much time I'm going to wait. It's if I don't make that bus, how much time other people are going to wait because of my schedule, right? And in my capacity and the responsibilities that we have, each of us on this call. Anyway, this is a tough question. Thank you.
An excellent point that you raised. I mean, frequency, it costs money. It means we put more buses on the routes. You know, to have a bus come right behind the next, that costs a lot of money that we don't currently have. You know, what we see here is what we have available. But it means a great deal to a person's individual lives, their schedules, their children, the people that depend on them. Frequency is very critical.
Yeah, it's a much bigger circle in many of our cases. It's not just impact on us, it's impact on our network, everybody else around us in what we do. So thank you.
Absolutely. So I see only 9 people have good, 10. Awesome. Thanks everybody. Thanks. Okay, I'm stopping sharing. I'm going to share results. Yep. I'm not surprised by these results. 8 minutes came out number 1 at 42%. And second was 15 minutes at 33%. Third, 20 minutes. Fourth, I would not wait. And then nobody's going to wait 30 or 60 minutes for the next bus. And you can see how, you know, our decisions on would we wait is the same as our community members. You know, if we have a 30-minute route, like Route 66, you know, that's hard. That definitely cuts some people off from taking transit. So frequency is freedom here. So if we can get higher frequency on our routes, I mean, that affects people's lives in a very positive way. So any other comments, questions about that before we move on?
I have a comment. I just can't find my electronic hand. You know, I put 8 minutes because I want to believe I would wait 8 minutes, and I won't. My history shows, I mean, I just am not patient enough to wait or take the chance the bus might be late. So it's really tough. I mean, frequency is just critical if we're going to attract riders of choice.
Wait, so Jeff, you're actually with me at the I would not wait?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to feel like I'm not alone. Thank you.
You're not alone.
But I honestly, Busy, I do want to say that although I did answer that question that way, the reality is that we have ownership in this, right? If we consciously choose, and I could see Mr. Chair looking at me through my camera and the screen, giving me the eye because he knew I answered that one that way. But we have a responsibility. I mean, if we conscientiously chose to do transit, then we, in being responsible people, we would account for that in our schedules, right? We would not allow other people to overbook us and give us that allowance in our schedules to accommodate the transit. That just hasn't happened on mine, and I'm just being completely honest. Thank you.
See, I think that, I answered 15 minutes, and honestly, it's probably closer to 8, but, for the sake of discussion, I think that reliability has a lot to do with how long I'm going to wait. If I know for a fact that the next bus is coming 8 minutes, or if I know for a fact that it's coming 15 minutes, I may wait. But if I don't know, if it may be closer to 20, or if I don't necessarily know that next bus is going to be like clockwork on time, I'm going to be much less likely as a transit user to want to take the bus again and again.
Absolutely. Excellent point. And I just would like to piggyback on that comment that, our real-time apps actually showing you where the bus is, is a huge confidence booster for our passengers of like, okay, the next bus is coming. I will wait. I am committed to transit. I'm not going to find a second way. So thank you for that. Any other comments?
Hey, jump in.
Yeah, I just wanted to make the observation. I think it's a very realistic conversation that we're having, but I want to make the observation that there's no bus that runs faster than 30 or 60 minutes on the weekends currently. So we're all saying that none of us would even consider using it. And we only have a handful of routes that are faster than 30 minutes. And so it just, speaking of our responsibility to other people, it really starts to speak to me to say like, wow, no one in this room would say that the frequency we put out there is an acceptable level for themselves. So that was it.
Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think and we get kind of hung up on the semantics of these questions because it's like how detailed or how is this information going to be used? But how long would I wait for the next bus if I missed one? Would probably be like 15 minutes. But if I'm committed to transit, and especially if that first and last mile really works for me, I'm gonna let my calendar know that I have a hard stop at a certain time at the end of the day, and I'm gonna make sure to hit that. But as far as like if it's convenience, it's like, hey, I'm gonna go downtown and grab lunch with people, then it's gonna be closer to 8 minutes. And so on the weekends, when our schedule is more flexible, I think it's easier to have harder stops potentially, and be able to hit the 30-minute, like you have those windows and you just plan for it, you make it a priority. But when it gets to real convenience and maybe a little bit more of those whimsical times, and you're like, oop, we missed this bus and we're going to go for the next one, then the frequency really makes a difference. But when it's intentional and it's maybe at the beginning and the end of the day, it's easier to know that another one's coming in 20 minutes. I'm going to sit at my desk for a little bit longer, and then I'm going to hit the next one.
Thank you for that. Mr. Malbeck.
Yeah, I just want to say that also has to do with what choice do I have? If I know I can drive pretty quickly and get free parking right in front of the place I want to go, I'm going to do that. However, if I don't have free parking and I know travel is really congested, I might take the bus. And that's why, from a policy perspective, we do have an impact on the kind of shift we want to make in people's behavior. And I know some would call that social engineering, but we're doing it all the time. And if we decide to put a whole bunch more money into parking lots to make it easier for people to drive and park and get around and sit in their car while they idle, we're just exacerbating the problem. If we put less money into parking and more money into frequency of transit, then we're continuing to make that shift.
Jeff, I fully agree, and I was going to say a similar comment. It's convenience and cost. If people know that they can drive as efficiently, but if they knew that there was a bus only lane and that the bus time was half as long as the driving time, they might be more willing to wait for that bus. But I agree. I think that people aren't really wanting to wait more than 15, 30 minutes at tops when they need to, if they don't have a car. It's tough. I think a lot of you know, I grew up in Israel and I go back every year, and they have a very strong bus infrastructure. So I have a little bit more patience for buses and willingness to do that. But in our culture, where it's very much a car culture, that shift is not going to be easy unless it's really incentivized by efficiency, reliance, as Josh spoke to, I believe it was, and just that, you know, transparency of accountability, you know, of that option. Any other comments? So I'll just say, you know, to our Deputy City Manager Dilly, you know, as we look at Lone Tree, for example, and expanding Lone Tree, can we talk about bus only lanes on Lone Tree? You know, on Milton, can we talk about bus only lanes? And this is a bigger conversation that we'll have, but that's what I'm looking to do at the city to the best of my ability as a council member. And I just think that we need to start prioritizing bus transportation so that we shift away from just building more parking lots. All right, Busy, keep going before we.
Thank you.
I'll choose not to take the bait on that one.
Good.
Excellent conversations. I so appreciate this. I have another poll on the same topic. I'd love to, I feel like I know what everybody's going to answer, but if Mountain Line received an additional $1 million each year to spend on bus operations, would you personally invest in coverage and or frequency? So option 1, 50% for higher frequency on one route, because that's basically what it costs to add one bus to one route anywhere, about $500,000 year over year. So would you add it, would you split it between frequency and a new route to provide coverage somewhere? Would you put it all into higher frequency on 2 routes? So 2 buses, each $500,000 going on to 2 routes. So Route 66 now 20 minutes or higher, something like that. Or would you put it all to 2 new routes where no transit service exists, but it may be very low frequency, since we're covering a large area for that bus to get around?
Can I put 100% for frequency on one route?
But then what are you going to do with the other $500,000, Jeff?
I'd put it on the same route to get 5-minute frequency.
Yes, you can absolutely do that, but it would be option number 2.
Okay.
Good
So,
clarification.
Busy, could I ask which one of these options in Mountain Line's analysis generates the most ridership?
So ridership is definitely, as we talked, you know, personally, frequency is very much the ridership attractor, you know, for all of the reasons that we just discussed. However,
option two would be the one that enhances ridership the most.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, finish your statement. Sorry.
Yeah, and on the other end, you know, we can't get any riders if there's no way for those individuals to access transit. So thinking Country Club, West Route 66, Ponderosa Trails, University Heights, you know, it's really hard for those individuals to access transit at all right now. So we can't even capture those riders. So we might get some riders with coverage option, but not as much as frequency.
So University Heights, as an example, you guys are right there already. It's just that you're really close. Is that a new route or is that extending a route?
Oh, within there, we definitely have, so University Heights specifically, we have some challenges with the road design, the hills, you know, snowy conditions. It's just very hard for us to access University Heights with a 40-foot long bus is truly the challenge that we're facing there. Could it be provided with something else on demand, which we'll come to, you know, smaller vehicles? Maybe that's a great way to provide some coverage.
School buses access University Heights. Are they a lot smaller than your typical bus?
I'm not sure how long the school bus is. I'm guessing probably similar.
Sorry, that's a tangent. Sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, I definitely look to our safety and operations staff on that.
Not hard to guess where I live, Busy. Thanks.
Shane, I would say though, no matter how we serve University Heights, I would call that a coverage improvement rather than a frequency improvement because we're not there currently.
Okay, so I didn't have a chance because I was too busy talking to answer that poll. But I would be the frequency. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah. And so seeing the results, everyone here is definitely in favor of higher frequency at 73%. That's the highest response. Second was splitting. So some coverage, some frequency. You had a couple people there. And then one person would like to see just coverage. Great. Thanks, everybody. I would like to just move on to the next topic. I think we could talk about this all day long, but just to be mindful of time, let's move on to the next slide, please, Rhonda. Thank you. And Kate, you're up.
Thank you. Yeah, so different types of goals that we might have might drive the way we want to design the future system. As we were just talking about, if we really feel like, we need to provide a minimum level of access to people who don't have it, I'm just going to, throw out there University Heights. We really need to get a bus back in there for the people who need it. That might be a very different goal than saying we really want to be the most efficient with our dollars and serve the highest ridership potential. I think those are things we've already heard. So different types of goals might drive the way we design the system. So high ridership potential would definitely lean towards frequency, support transit dependent populations. That's a bit of frequency and coverage. You need the bus to be close enough, but also they have lives that they need to lead in a timely fashion, as we've all been discussing. Pedestrian and bicycle access. So what is the connection so that people can get to it might be a goal that drives some decision making. What the city's calling the big shift, the climate action. How do we convert drivers to transit and reduce emissions? That might be a combination of different things we do to design the system to try to reduce vehicle miles traveled the most we can within the community. Is our goal really to serve major destinations? Is it to reduce traffic congestion? Depending on what we select, we might design in slightly different ways. So with that, I think we actually have another poll. Is that right, Busy?
Correct. I think we can go to the next slide and it says poll. Yeah. That's my cue. So with any new funding, how should Mountain Line prioritize new services? Please select up to 3. So option 1, target areas with highest ridership potential, or support transit dependent populations, or pedestrian and bicycle improvements to access transit. Another option, converting drivers to transit to reduce emissions. Is that a very high goal, as I heard earlier on a poll? Serve major destinations, existing or future. The hospital is moving. You can't have a hospital without transit service. I mean, that seems like a high priority personally. Reducing traffic congestion and improving safety for all roadway users or other. If you have another priority, we would love to hear that.
And again, we can select up to 3?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Izzy, I don't know how I feel about us putting bicycles up here, making us choose. Making it tough.
Asking hard questions here. Great, we're about halfway through. We're getting closer, a couple more responses. Thanks for everybody's participation and conversation. This is so great. And in thinking of time, I would like to just look at the responses once I think we're about there. Has everybody provided their response? It's gonna slow down. I'm gonna stop sharing. Thank you. Awesome. So target areas with highest ridership potential was our number 1. Number 2, support transit dependent populations. 3, reduce traffic congestion and improve safety for all roadway users. And then tied for 4th is reducing emissions, serving major destinations, and oops, did I get that wrong? Sorry. 3rd is, oh my gosh, I am so sorry. I misread all of this. Geez. Okay, so number 1, highest ridership potential. 2, supporting transit dependent populations. Oh no, I had it right. So ped and bike, reducing emissions, major destinations are tied for fourth, and other. Who said other, and what did you think?
This is Jeff, and I said other, and I think you should provide Shane with a bus pass.
All right, that's a good cue. I had my hand raised. I'm just curious on the first option there, target areas with the highest ride share potential. That's the lifeblood, right? I mean, if we didn't have that as a focus, I mean, that's the resource that keeps the whole thing going, right? Is ridership. So that makes sense to me. But is that I assumed that was what it is. Is that correct, Busy? That ridership kind of drives it all. I mean, that's how we continue to provide this service. Thanks.
Yeah, great question. I do think, ridership, absolutely, put out transit for people to ride it. That is the whole point, right? But I think that's a great goal. Are we targeting the dense areas and places that we know people are going to ride it? That's, I think, a lofty goal and ideal. But also the coverage question always comes up. I mean, there's, what about everybody else that doesn't live in those dense areas? I mean, do we have a responsibility to provide some level of transit to more people?
So my quick response to that, and I appreciate the question, and it's real. I'm sure that you guys wrestle with that every single day. Is that if we're not succeeding on targeting the highest ridership potential, then it really handicaps Mountain Line's ability to in a positive way answer those other questions that you have. I mean, you can't get out to the more remote areas. You can't satisfy Shane Dilley in University Heights if we're not succeeding on that first bullet point in terms of making sure that we are succeeding in reaching the highest potential ridership. Thanks.
Thank you for that comment. And just in, so looking at the time, I just want to make sure we're staying on time. So I am going to move us along. Great discussion again. We will have so many more opportunities throughout this process to discuss. But Rhonda, if you would go to the next slide, and I believe Estella is up.
Thank you, Busy. So this term has been brought up a few times this morning, microtransit on demand. And essentially, on-demand transportation is an umbrella term for transportation services that are flexible, meaning they're not following a fixed route or have fixed stops like our traditional bus. They're real-time hailed, so they can be hailed on an app or a calling option similar to Uber or Lyft. And they utilize emerging technologies and private sector partnerships. This is essentially another tool in the toolbox to provide transportation services. And so there are two main types. One is microtransit that has been brought up a few times, and which in Mountain Line's case, this would be using smaller vehicles. Our paratransit vehicle, for example, which is pictured on the right-hand side, and turning those paratransit vehicles to provide on-demand trips or into Ubers and Lyfts, for example. Another example is TNC, or a transportation network company partnership. So actually partnering with Uber, Lyft, and subsidizing trips through those entities. Next slide, please. And so some of the benefits, or kind of why a transportation agency would implement these types of services. So first, looking at the customer perspective on the left side, it can reduce wait times. Typically with on-demand transportation, wait times are anywhere between 5 and 20 minutes. It can increase that convenience and flexibility. Again, the rides can be hailed on demand. And it can enhance the travel options available in a community. And then looking at the right-hand side, so for Mountain Line's perspective, or why a transit agency would implement this, it can provide service to fill the transportation gap. So for example, if there is a neighborhood that's low density, has winding roads, for example, University Heights, this could be an option to fill that service gap. The second one, so it can be more cost efficient than a fixed route. So if there's a low ridership route, it can be more efficient to replace that low performing route with an on-demand service. And then lastly, it can promote an integrated transportation system. So thinking of kind of these first mile, last mile connections. So maybe there's a neighborhood near transit, can actually, serve that area with maybe microtransit to connect the passengers to the larger fixed route system. And sort of together, these benefits, it is very much a customer service first approach, really, making convenience kind of as the top priority. And it can help address community transportation needs. So if there is a certain neighborhood or a major activity center wanting to serve that area, this can be an option. Next slide, please. And so a little bit of a reminder, so Mountain Line completed an on-demand feasibility study and was actually adopted by the board in November of 2019. And the intent of this plan is to understand how on-demand transportation can be applied to our system. And so there are three main goals. One was looking at a cost-effective solution. So looking at our low-performing routes and seeing if maybe we can replace them with on-demand. The second goal was seeing if we can provide a level of service where there currently was none. So either spatially, so those geographic gaps, or temporally, thinking of like late night service. And then the third goal was this first mile, last mile connection. So kind of filling in those missing holes in our system. And next slide, please. And so just kind of highlighting these three goals, I'll be running through these fairly quickly, but the intent is really to showcase how on-demand transportation can be applied in our system, meeting different goals. And so these are just several examples. However, there are other areas that can be analyzed further. And so goal one, again, looking at that kind of cost-effective solution. So route 5, which is 60-minute frequency, seeing if we can streamline that route. And so streamlining it and providing, it's called Thorpe Loop. So kind of replacing part of the route that was lower ridership and being able to provide a microtransit service. And so as you can see on that chart, it is slightly less expensive if we were to provide it with fixed route of similar service. So next slide, please. So goal 2, looking at those geographic gaps and those temporal gaps. And so 2 examples. One is a late night, again, this kind of Uber or Lyft partnership, but could be microtransit as well, but providing that late night gap. And then with Donny Park, so seeing if we can serve that area. Again, I'm sure as many of you know, that area is very low density, borderline rural area. Seeing if we can serve that area through microtransit or a TNC partnership. So just a quick cost check, you can see that some of these are significantly less expensive if we were to provide a fixed route equivalent. Next slide, please. And so goal 3, so providing a first mile, last mile. So we do have University Heights on here. So, but looking, one of the options is Country Club, which is, again, a suburban area, but near Route 3, a fixed route. So seeing if we can better serve that area and connect people to the nearby transit. University Heights as well. There's Route 10, which is our highest frequency route, as well as 4 and 14. So seeing if we can kind of capture that neighborhood and bring people to the existing transit. Next slide, please. And then lastly, so kind of as a reminder, this was presented on last board and TAC meeting last month, but we are planning on implementing a microtransit pilot this August in the Huntington Industrial Corridor. So really focusing on kind of this first mile, last mile solution, providing better access to this corridor, which has a variety of human service agencies, nonprofits, clinics, et cetera, and wanting to provide more mobility options and just better access to connect people from the fixed route to this area. And we will be working on kind of coordinating with our paratransit. So it'll be very interesting kind of on the outcomes of this pilot, which I think will help influence if we have future microtransit expansions. And sorry, one thing to note, this was grant funded. So this was one-time funding to provide both the planning and the implementation of a microtransit pilot. I think that's it from me. Next slide, please.
And I did just want to ask if anybody had questions for Estella on that on demand.
Erin, I have one quick question. Would the fare be the same for the on-demand? Because it feels like it should be a little higher.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And so it can change depending on the service. For the microtransit, for the pilot that we'll be implementing in the Huntington Industrial Corridor, it's actually, and there are some challenges since we don't currently have fare boxes on our paratransit. So wanted to make it very easy and kind of streamline the process. We're planning on just making it $1 for a trip. But there are ways that, you know, in the future, kind of if this is a successful pilot and we want to make something permanent, ways that you can integrate the fare. So, you know, if you have a fixed route pass, that you can board a microtransit as well. So it depends. Sometimes if it's a very large service area, I have seen it in other communities that it is more expensive than the fixed route. Since this pilot is a very small area, staff felt like we didn't want to make it more expensive.
Thank you.
Great. And I know Estella will be presenting on that pilot program, you know, in many future board meetings. So if there are other comments or questions, ask now, but it would be great to move forward on time. I don't see any hands. Are we feeling good to move on?
I did have a question, but
Sure.
Estella, I could take that with you offline if we're out of time. My question is more kind of along the lines of Erin's question regarding how these are being funded. Are they subsidized, these micro transit routes, and outside of your more formal transit routes, are these subsidized by the transit tax at all? And if so, when we start extending outside of the city's jurisdiction, those folks aren't paying that transit tax. And so would those fees have to be kind of, self-supporting? In other words, you know, if you get out there, whatever fee is charged is the fee that is required to pay the entire cost of that service. I'm just curious how you guys as staff are thinking through these things. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll try and answer quickly. So the pilot in the Huntington Industrial Corridor, this is kind of a unique case. This is with one-time grant funding. It's actually 100%, so no local match is being used. However, if we were to either continue the pilot or expand it to other areas, that would require Mountain Line. It's just like adding another bus. It comes out of our operations budget. So either, you know, we need additional funding, potentially through a tax or other ways, but we would need additional money to cover that cost. And definitely if we were to expand, for example, Donny Park, so somewhere outside of the city limits, that is a challenge because currently our funding, you know, is from the city of Flagstaff. So we would have to think of other ways to try and fund that. Typically fares, I don't think there's any transportation system where the fares actually cover the whole cost. So it's always kind of helps supplement the program, but I do not, fares would not cover the whole operation cost.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was awesome information on demand. Thanks for the questions. I would like to move forward on that and just in being mindful of time. And I would like to just mention that we will be discussing how city sales tax should be used in the breakout session. That is a question that we do want to hear from everybody on. I think staff would like guidance on that topic. So there's a little tickler coming up. So I would like to cover the key points from the 2017 transit plan that is currently in place that we are adopting through this effort, because staff do believe that the transit plan is valid. There's a lot of components to it that absolutely make sense and we believe should be carried forward into this next plan. And so I will cover those as kind of a base as we, you know, kick off the plan update. And so the first item in the 2017 plan was coverage versus frequency. We've had a lot of conversation on that. And I would just like to say that the board of directors in this 2017 time period directed staff to maintain all existing coverage so that no one would lose access to the transit service that they ride to at that time. But the board also directed staff to focus on any new future funding on increasing frequencies and increasing ridership. So that was a key point. Definitely chose frequency over coverage, but in a couple of slides, you'll see that there were some coverage components. Next slide, please, Rhonda. So another key point of the 2017 plan was the permanent transit network. You can see that here. So these purple lines are not the complete transit system, right? You don't see Lone Tree, you don't see Cheshire. It is the core of the system that Mountain Line identified that they can make the strongest commitment to service on these corridors where the purple line is on. And this permanent transit network was based on the city's regional centers. And this came out from Mountain Line as our contribution to the ongoing conversation among transit planners, land use planners, developers, and private organizations about how and where the city should have transit-oriented development. Development of multimodal street improvements and locating transit priority projects on these corridors would do the most to help Mountain Line deliver efficient and high ridership service in the future. And it's a great concept. We've heard a lot of positive feedback from our partners, and it has contributed to the high occupancy housing plan. But there's still a gap with this plan, with all of our plans, our community plans and policies, and actually having a permanent transit network, having teeth. It's a great concept. There's just no requirement associated with it, which it just is what it is there. And we continue to keep getting off-system requests. So, we put it out there. The development community, a lot of we still have trouble actually staying on the PTN in our land use patterns and development patterns. And so with this, I would like to ask, next slide, please, Rhonda. Awesome, okay. Just wanna make sure I do have a poll. Nope, and I apologize. I did not put a poll. I missed this poll. But I'm just curious if board members and TAC members agree with this PTN. Do you like it? Just looking for a little feedback. We can have about a minute here. Okay. Oh, Shane, is your hand still up from before?
Yes, and it was getting really tired. So thanks for the reminder to put it down.
Absolutely.
And Busy, the question is if we like the main corridors.
Yes, do you agree with the PTN, the permanent transit network that's on the map here? Yes or no? Do you feel like that's appropriate? Okay, Member Tressler, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, so if, I think I do, but it gets to those priorities though that I think it was one of the last polls we did. And if we believe that we should be focusing on the people that need, that are dependent on transit most, I could see some modifications into, the areas where people need it most. But by and large, I think, yeah, I would agree with this.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next slide. Thanks for the feedback. Next slide, please, Rhonda.
Busy, I think Jeff had a quick comment. Sorry.
Nope, thank you.
I support it. I think it's great.
Appreciate the feedback. Okay, another key point of the 2017 plan is the future funding scenario. So this map shown here is based on the board decision to focus any new future funding on increasing frequencies. So the colors on this map correlate to the frequency. So red is the highest frequency every 10 to 15 minutes. And then purple every 15 to 20 minutes. So that's like Route 7, Route 2, looking at Route 3, 4, and 14. And then also every 30 minutes. So we have our Route 5, that would be an increase, et cetera. So kind of identifying what the frequencies on the various corridors should be, but also you can see the dashed lines identify future routes. So there was some aspects of coverage, but definitely focusing on frequency. And next slide, please, Rhonda. Thank you. And here's a poll, should be pretty simple, a yes or a no. So if we don't receive additional funding, do you believe the current system is optimized to serve the forecasted population and associated development in Flagstaff and the surrounding community? And I just see a couple, awesome. And just in observance of time, I'm gonna close this down. Thanks everybody. And that was a quick response, perfect. So the majority, slim majority thought yes, it is optimized, and slim minority thought it is not optimized. So thank you for that. And I would like to just continue moving forward. I apologize if you have some comments on that. I would love to hear it in the future. So the next item is community feedback. This was kind of the big picture response that we heard during the 2017 planning effort, so the previous transit plan. And public feedback guided plan development, but the board's top goal was to achieve high ridership for efficiency and cost per passenger. And you can see the #1 community priority of coverage differed from the board. Next slide, please, Rhonda. And that may have contributed to maybe part of our vote fail. So in 2018, Mountain Line did bring a tax increase question to voters, and it failed by a very slim number of votes, which is disappointing. But you can see that very much where there is no transit service, we got a no vote. You know, heard from public, they wanted coverage, and maybe that was part of that no response. But so without any new funding, Mountain Line was only able to implement one aspect from the 2017 plan, and that was to split Route 7 into 2 routes, 7 and 8, which we did in 2019. And we increased the frequency on Route 7 from 30 minutes to 20 minutes, which has been really great for our riding public there. Next slide, please. And then, so 2018 was a no. Mountain Line's ambitious, and we started talking with the board again, really talking about a possible tax question in 2020. So here's kind of the concept based on the 2017 transit plan that we were talking with the previous board about. So on the left is the current system, which we have today, and on the right was a future funding scenario. And not everything, you know, it was a menu of options that we talked about on that right map, the map on the right. And next slide, please, Rhonda. And we connected kind of those fixed route options with the on-demand plan. So this is those two aspects combined, as Estella previously discussed. And combining those two components, next slide, please, Rhonda, we went to the board and talked about a prioritized list of improvements. And you can see them here. You know, again, this is previous board decisions, ranking. The cost is very much a rough estimate, but it was something that we had available. This was the ranking that the previous board identified. And I want to point out that the blue line would have been the tax increase that should 2018 ballot measure have passed. That's about the amount of money that would have supported those services, 1 through 6. And I have another, let's see, next slide, please, Rhonda. Awesome. Okay, I have 2 polls here. So they should be on your screen, looking for some responses. So do you agree with the service expansion items on the list? Yes or no? And do you agree with the service expansion order of priority? Great. And as people are kind of looking at the list, thank you for everybody providing some responses. Awesome. And just in being mindful of time, I'm going to end the poll and share these results. So we did see, we're hearing a lot of agreement with what was previously based, which is great, or just rather, it's great to have some feedback and hear that we were on the right page before. And so this is kind of the basis for us moving into our update on the 5-year transit plan. And next slide, please, Rhonda. I just have one more slide and then we'll move on to AECOM. And so without resources, plans are not funded. And so the ultimate purpose of this planning effort is to assess voter support for scenarios, allow the board to analyze timing options for transit tax, build public awareness and support for transit services, potentially make this a launch pad for a future tax question, what year to be decided, if at all, and we do have a midterm plan update available if voter support is low, and we can take the temperature of the community again. And with that, I would like to turn it over to AECOM, and next slide, please, Rhonda.
All right, thank you very much, Busy, appreciate it. So some of the specifics of the plan itself, it's about a year-long process through this year, and we started a couple months back with defining what the vision is and also what are those future needs based on all the work that's been done to date. And then as we go into the end of summer, we're going to analyze those scenarios and come up with recommendations that will be presented and submitted to the community for input. As part of the fall timeline, this will kind of interplay with the question about the service priorities in terms of the funding available, how much is the community willing to pay for a tax. So those will mirror each other as we get toward the end of the fall. And so those 3 major components will go into the finalization of the plan toward the end of this year. Again, very high level, but those are the major 4 stages that we plan to approach this plan. Next slide, please. And as you heard, over and over, a lot of work has been done. We don't want to reinvent the wheel, but there certainly will be some additional outcomes that come out of this new and updated plans. Certainly incorporating the lessons learned from Proposition 421, equity and other key components. So developing kind of that analysis tool to see how services are definitely providing equitable transit services. The financial assessment I already touched on as part of this. Key performance indicators. Of course, we have those standard KPIs that are, when you look at passengers per hour and subsidy per passenger, some of the major ones. We also want to see how maybe we can measure that from our goals that have been developed. And focusing your attention there on the right-hand side, we took a unique approach because so much work has been done on different plans. There's the carbon neutrality plan and the Blueprint 2040 and all these other documents the community has already weighed in on. So we took an approach where we actually developed goals based on community input. And in a couple of weeks when our website goes live, those goals will be out in front of the public with the intent to receive feedback, but they're really keyed in on those 6 terms that you see on the right-hand side there. And we'll have a bit of a narrative describing those in a little more detail in the public outreach. Non-traditional transit services, you heard Estella touch on the on-demand type services, so those will be considered. And then at the end of the plan, we'll go into our recommendations, both in the short term and the long term. And then to answer the question, if no additional funding is approved, then where do we go from here? And I really hope as we go to the future, I found the responses interesting in terms of the service optimization, almost split in half there. So I think that'll help kind of frame that discussion to answer that question. Next slide, please. And one of the major differences here is we're going to have a really big public engagement component throughout this year. And so Monica Hernandez is our public involvement lead, and I'll turn it over to her to describe how we're going to approach this subject. Monica?
Thank you, Darren. Good morning, everyone. So let's talk about the public engagement program and what are some of the ideas the objectives behind it, and what are some of the key elements associated with the program as far as strategies go and so on. So really what we want to do, and I think we heard some of this earlier as part of today's conversation, is we want to increase awareness about the project, build support for the project, provide opportunities for many community members to have access to information and share input to inform various decisions that will be made throughout the course of the project, and solicit informed input. And I stress on the word informed because to a great extent, we will be dealing with some very technical topics. So we need to make sure that when we are sharing information, soliciting input, that we are indeed creating those opportunities so that people can understand what exactly we are referring to and be able to provide us with, again, informed input. So as far as our public involvement plan goes, there are some key elements tied to the plan. We've got a focus groups and a telephone survey that are included as part of the social research. Fred Solup will follow after I present my slides and go into detail on those particular social research items. He'll discuss the purpose and some of the current findings on those items. And then the next bullet on there is the online engagement. This is an excellent opportunity for crowdsourcing. The site that we will be creating and standing up will serve as the main hub for online engagement. It'll feature different surveys, different interactive maps, opportunities for members of the public to participate. And then we also understand that not everyone in our community has access to online tools or may not prefer online tools. So we are cognizant of that, and we will be providing different opportunities for people to participate. So the Title VI engagement includes direct notification, in-person pop-up events, depending on where we're at with the restrictions on in-person meetings and so on, a phone line where people can call and listen to different messages about the project and share their comments and questions. And then one key element here is the Citizen Advisory Committee. This is a new committee that is being formed for the purposes of this particular project. And the idea is to allow for people to, again, provide recommendations on key plan elements and also serve as public outreach liaisons, be able to work with these different community members, advisory community members, so that they can turn around and share information with their respective networks. Membership, as far as who is being invited and the different types of representation that we are aiming to have for this committee, it's diverse. And that is what we're looking for. We're looking for members from the business community, the ADA community, grassroots, education institutions, bicycling advocates. So that's just an example of the type of representation that we will be seeking for this particular Citizen Advisory Committee. Education is a key element of this project. As I mentioned earlier, we will be dealing with some very technical topics. So we, again, need to make sure that we're able to explain information in easy to understand formats and manners. So one of them being the transit service trade-offs. That will be a key area that we will focus on, providing various educational narratives. And then also the role of public involvement. So as members of the community, what does it mean as it relates to having their input into this process? Where is it that we are seeking input, and how will the input be utilized? So we need to make sure that we are conveying those particulars and that we are upfront so that, again, the community understands where they have a role as far as the decision making behind the plan goes. Next slide. So this right here gives you basically a glimpse of the process that Darren spoke about, which covers the key stages of the project. I've identified where we will be injecting the different public engagement phases. Again, public involvement will be continuous throughout the project. We will be soliciting input again throughout the project. However, these are those key areas where we will be asking questions and turning around and presenting our findings and identifying how the input was used. So this is just, again, a listing of those different project stages. With this said, I will turn it over to Dr. Fred Solup to walk us through the latest and greatest on the social research. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you, Darren, and Busy. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. If we could go to the first slide. Thank you very much. So I've been asked to weigh in on this process to provide 2 opportunities for the voting public to systematically participate, to have input into this engagement process. Well, the engagement process has already started, and I conducted 4 with likely Flagstaff voters. These 4 focus groups were conducted April 27th, April 29th, May 3rd, and May 4th. Again, these were likely Flagstaff voter groups. Divided the public up into 2 types of groups, rider groups and non-rider groups. And that decision was made based on previous research, which had shown that ridership is the key influence as to whether or not someone's going to support a mountain line ballot question or not. It's not the only input, but it's a key demographic. So we divided the groups up to hear from riders and to hear from non-riders. The groups were balanced by gender, race, ethnicity, and age. And just to reiterate, these were focus groups. So they're randomly selected participants divided into these groups. There's some sense of balancing the groups, as I mentioned, but for diverse input. These are descriptive in nature. It's a 2-hour opportunity to hear what people are saying, to hear the way people conceptualize concerns, think about concerns, and approach mountain lions. So it's not the same as doing a survey. I'll be conducting a survey with likely voters later in the process, in the late summer, early fall. If we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. These are just top level findings. The groups were just conducted. I'm working on a report. I'll have that report produced and out to Mountain Lion by the middle of June. I can say after listening to these 28 people talk for a 2-hour period, there are positive feelings toward public transit in Flagstaff. People are very happy to have a bus system. They know that it's valuable. They appreciate that it's there for people who need it, for people who use it, not necessarily for themselves. That people still believe that car use tends to be more convenient, it's more efficient. It's if I'm going shopping, I'll take my car. If I'm going to work, I'll take my car. It gets me there faster, I'm in control. And bus transit, again, is there for people who depend on it, and I'm happy that it exists. That's what the public's saying. When I ask people what are the major concerns in Flagstaff, the top local concern is housing affordability. And people also talked about housing availability, but as we probed that topic, we saw that availability is really a function of affordability. People understand that housing prices are just skyrocketing in Flagstaff, and that's prices of purchasing a home, but that's also the cost of renting an apartment. People told horrible stories of going to purchase a home or going to find an apartment, and the prices were changed. There was a huge demand that they thought they were acting quickly. They didn't get there fast enough. They had to wait. They had to trade up over time. Most people have a story about housing in Flagstaff, and those stories aren't positive. Housing affordability is the top concern in Flagstaff. There are other issues. Traffic, growth and development are issues. Climate change is an issue. And the need for social services are issues that are out there. And there's a recognition that there's a link between transit and all of these issues. Transit has a role to play. Transit can help alleviate traffic congestion. Transit can help mitigate future climate change impacts on Flagstaff. There is a recognition that transit has something to play. It's just that transit is not a top level concern for likely voters in Flagstaff. They're really focused on this question of housing affordability, which means going to the ballot, that people's attention will be placed on a housing question. If that should go to the ballot this next ballot season, people will focus on housing. They'll think about transit down the road. I should say that it was interesting. I conducted research for Mountain Line just before COVID hit, and looked at the likelihood of a ballot question passing. This time around I was expecting to see more impacts from COVID. People saying I'm unemployed, my finances aren't going so well. I wasn't seeing that. I wasn't registering that. People are willing to entertain ballot questions. They want to hear about ballot questions, but they're not ruling them out by any means. So that is something to think about for the future cycle. When people talked about improving the transit system in Flagstaff, they talked about increasing the frequency of buses, better route availability. And another issue, a topic which came up in several of the groups, was safety, trying to improve safety at bus stops and safety on the buses themselves. Next slide, please. So in order there's a lot of noise out there when it comes to the ballot. People are, as I said, are going to be obviously focusing on candidates. They're going to be thinking about housing. They're going to be thinking about affordability issues. In order to break through the noise, in order to gain some attention, ballot success for transit will be helped by really thinking out of the box, going big, doing something different, something that mixes up the system, that changes the system. It needs to go beyond just asking for money for new routes or asking to increase frequency. Some ideas which emerged: an all electric bus fleet, going all electric, which obviously links to the climate change concerns for the future. Park and ride outside the city. Folks were thinking about creating opportunities where people who can't get housing in Flagstaff are living further out, creating opportunities perhaps for those people to use their car to go to a park and ride site and then get transit to go into Flagstaff. Another opportunity to think out of the box may be free service, creating a situation where people don't need to pay for individual bus rides. Any ballot question to be successful would require a widespread information campaign. There needs to be a lot of information out there. It needs to get through to people. Again, it needs to go beyond the noise. 100% transparency. People want to know what they're paying for. They want to know that it's well thought out, that effort has gone into this, that they're not being asked to pay too much for something, that it's a modest request. People want to see local leadership. They recognize that for transit improvements and for approaching many of these issues, that we really need local leadership coming from the city council, from the mayor's office. They want to see the elected leaders focusing on this question of transit to legitimate it, to make it a high level concern. And a concrete demonstration of impact, specifically to say, if you're putting forward a ballot proposal about traffic congestion, well, this ballot proposal, if passed, will lead to X reduction, 3%, 5%, 10% reduction in traffic. That's part of the transparency issue. They want to see a demonstration of impact for these issues. There was also discussion about alternative funding sources. People are not so reluctant to say, some people say, yeah, I'll support whatever Mountain Line puts up there. But by and large, people are saying, let's look first to other funding sources. For instance, and I recognize that some of these aren't viable, but I'm providing a list of what our focus group participants discussed. There's a lot of concern amongst likely voters that issues like housing and cost of living, affordability, are influenced by second homeowners, investors coming into Flagstaff, Airbnbs. A lot of people talked about Airbnbs on their street and how it's really changed the composition of their community. What about looking to second homeowners, Airbnb owners for funding? Employers have a role to play here if they want to encourage their employees to take public transit to get to work, and to then approach employers and have them step up to provide additional funding. The business community, businesses can play a role here in supporting the bus system. NAU, we know NAU already leverages money to support Mountain Line Bus. Several of our focus group members either had been students and had experience. 1 or 2 were students now and have experience with NAU buses and see that that's a very positive system. It's been very helpful. And perhaps NAU can do further support for the bus system. People notice that there are lines at the marijuana dispensaries, and maybe there's a way of using taxation on marijuana to support the local community, to support buses and public transit, and developers, property developers. People want to know, again, part of this transparency, part of this sense that anything coming to the ballot has been thought out. People want to know that additional funding sources have been probed. Others are standing up and supporting the public transit. And then people will be more likely to deeper into their pockets to support public transit as well. These are just top level findings. I'll be exploring these findings with more depth in the report that I provide. And again, later in the process, the engagement process, I'll be conducting a widespread phone survey with likely Flagstaff voters. Thank you. Available to answer questions.
That was great. That was great, Fred. Thank you so much. Any questions, or I'm not sure how much time we have.
Yeah, thanks for checking in on time. I do just want to say we're not going to do the breakout session. We ran out of time, so we can have some questions for Fred, and then I will have some follow-up questions after that. So proceed.
I have a quick question for Fred, Mr. Chair.
Okay, go ahead.
Fred, Shane Dilley here. Thank you for that breakdown of the information that you've received. So in terms of a strategy for a ballot question, whether it's now or later, it would be easier for us to be successful with the transit question if the community didn't have such a looming issue on their shoulders, that being affordable housing. So if the community were to somehow take measures to address that in a public way, and the community largely saw, okay, we're really working to address this, then what I heard you say is that they would be more likely to elevate transit as a higher priority, and we would be more successful that way. Is that another way of distilling what you said? Thank you.
That is a way of distilling it in the sense that that housing is the primary concern, housing affordability. We know that that's a very difficult problem to solve, and any resolution would not come in the short term. So that's still a challenge when it comes to the ballot in 2022. If there's nothing on the ballot regarding housing, if it appears that there's already efforts being made to resolve that issue at the city level, then there will be more of an opportunity for transit to be successful.
Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Fantastic presentation. I mean, the experience of the whole team shows, and I think you've just nailed every point in terms of the approach. And to the question about housing affordability and transportation affordability, I kind of go back to something I think I heard Kate Morley say. Total cost of living, housing, and transportation combined are the two biggest costs. It's very hard to do anything about housing affordability. We don't know how to do it. We do know how to increase transit service to make transportation more affordable. You provide higher frequency service on routes and even expand service. And if people can shift to that and they can make Flagstaff more affordable that way, it can have an impact on the overall affordability of this community. Making that connection for voters, I don't think is easy. I think it's very difficult, but I put it out there because it might be a path.
That's great, thank you. Fred, did you have a thought that you'd like to share?
I appreciate that that thinking, Jeff, and that is a complex set of relationships there to for the public to make. We do know that we have a very educated voting public, and the voting public really wants to see the research. They want to see the dots connected, and they want to be able to connect those dots for themselves. So in that sense, once you're able to do that, I think that would be very helpful. People weren't talking, however, about overall cost of living. They were talking about affordability of housing. So to push them further now to think about transportation costs and how that links to affordability is a challenge that would face this group in the future.
Other comments or questions? You know, Fred, I really liked what you said about sustainability. I think that that's a real big talking point right now in the community and on council. And I think housing is our top priority. And I hope that we will put a housing bond on the ballot this upcoming election cycle. I don't see that not happening. So that when we do bring this forward to the voters as a ballot initiative, I think they'll be more primed to listen to our case. And I think tying it to sustainability, maybe even in a package with a sustainability bond or within a sustainability bond and just branding it together, I think might go a long way. And we can have future conversations about this, but I think it needs to stand out. I think it needs to be newsworthy. I think it needs to be a talking point that people will be proud to communicate to their friends about. Like you said, something big. And yeah, that's exciting.
And Councilmember Shimoni, I would also just underline that there's a huge role for City Council and for the mayor to play here in making those connections for people and giving priority to this.
And then the last thing I was going to say is, you know, education being a huge component. Like you said, people want to see that transparency. So in my mind, you know, I'm always going to preach videos, and those who know me know that I do that all the time. And so I would love to see, like, you know, as we start to approach this, even a year out, start a video campaign and have a real strong effort that really educates on all the different facets and angles in not a 20-minute video, but a 3-minute video, a series of 3 minutes, right? Anyways, we can talk more about that, but I think that that education and that transparency and communication is so important.
Absolutely.
Other questions or comments? Jeff, your hand is still raised. I'm guessing you're stretching.
Take my hand down.
And Busy, given that we're not going into the breakouts, are there more conversations that we're going to have still?
Yes, thank you so much, Director Shimoni. Yep, my bad, I didn't control our timeline as well as I should have, but the discussion has been incredible. Thank you for everybody's participation. And we're just going to have a large group discussion of what we would have talked about in our breakout session. We do have about 10 minutes. I do have two very important questions that I'd like to ask. And the first one is, hopefully you can see my screen. Okay, we're all in agreement that the largest healthcare facility in Northern Arizona needs transit service. So how does transit serve the hospital in Fort Tuthill? So on the screen, you should see a map. The colored lines are all of our transit routes currently. There's an arrow pointing to where the hospital currently is. We all know where that is. And then an arrow pointing to the proposed healthcare facility in Fort Tuthill. So just opening it up to thoughts on transit serving the new hospital location.
Yes, it's through University Heights. Sorry. Opportunity there.
Great. And I see a lot of hands. Please go ahead.
Okay, I'll go. The first thing that just popped in my head is we might be able to kill two birds with one stone and get to the airport as well.
And there's a question, is NAH still, the new location, is it within city limits? And yes, it is within city limits.
Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And as the county's worked with the NAH team to understand traffic impacts to Fort Tuthill and how we might, as Fort Tuthill, the park evolves, we could have some synergy there and sync up our traffic. There's definitely some questions about the timing of the development, and it's a huge complex. It is not just a hospital. It is several buildings, several facilities. It's huge. And so I think one way that that we provide transit is that, and is we got to be at the table. Mountain Line needs to be at the table with Metro Plan. Metro Plan's leading some studies, and maybe they're completed now. But to understand when things are going to be built and how to phase in the services and what the expected ridership is in different areas. And but it's definitely moving quickly, really quickly. And it's unfortunate if we haven't already invited Mountain Line to the table.
Thank you for that.
And I don't see other hands raised. And I would just like to clarify, these are great comments. How do we fund this service? Is a tax appropriate? Is hospital contribution needed? We can make lines on a map, no problem. How do we put the bus on the road? How do we fund those buses?
Busy, really quick before we jump into that, Jeff, on the last topic.
Yeah, and I'll try to take a stab at the next topic too. I think you absolutely have to be there. What I was going to say is you absolutely have to be there, and I don't know how you pay for it with all your other priorities. But you need to be to this point of having transit be a better option than driving. Transit service has to be designed into that complex so that people know they can get where they want to go. It's not an afterthought where you pull up and block traffic while you're letting people on and off. And then we just need to look for ways to provide that high level of service. And it might be reducing service on other routes. I mean, I don't know, it's tough, but you got to be in the game, I think, or else the community moves on, the plan moves on without you.
And we're caught trying to play catch up. Who else has a comment on the funding? Aaron, can NAU fund it? Just kidding. You know, I do see the partnership with the airport and the hospital being worthy and doing both at once on one route. And so I can see some partnership with the city here. We'll see what Heidi thinks in the airport community, but other comments? Along with NH, of course.
Not hearing additional comments. Okay, I do have a second question. Thank you for that discussion. We will be talking about the hospital so much more. It's a critical topic for Mountain Line.
Wait, I'm sorry, Lizzie,
Yes, please.
Mr. Chair, can I just interrupt? I apologize,
yes.
Busy, but you know, listening to your discussion and a comment that was raised about Mountain Line being at the table for this new hospital project, it just drew up this memory of this helped me recall a discussion that Kate was having with our city council about what was it, Kate, the Timber Sky project or cottages or something. Cottages where Kate made a comment that, you know, it's always really hard to jump in on this as Mountain Line on the back end of these planning discussions, these development discussions. And so can I just outright ask Mountain Line right now as a deputy city manager, are you guys engaged in the new hospital project? And if so, at what level? If not, that's news that I need to hear. Please let me know to what extent you guys are engaged on that topic.
Yeah, we have our first meeting with them this afternoon, actually. So that's good
with
news.
them or with CD, I mean, with the city at the table, or is this a separate meeting with the hospital folks?
This is specifically about transit, but Tiffany, the project manager, and Tiffany Antal will be there, as well as Jeff Bowman. And we are hoping to have that holistic conversation to say, we know that there are going to be significant traffic impacts that the hospital likely can't mitigate, every single one that will be identified in the TIA. So how do we have a holistic transportation conversation that says we recognize impacts to cars, but transit we're going to provide transit as part of the mitigation. So.
Sure, and thank you, Kate. And I don't think that this is really delayed or untimely, because it was only, what, a week ago that they actually submitted their initial set to the city, which really kind of kicked everything off, so formally anyway. So I think this is timely, and it's good to hear that you guys are being engaged. This is really important, because if there's a development agreement associated with this project, knowing these needs on the front end allows staff to better engage and to find where that sweet spot is in terms of recommending exactions that would go before our city council for approval. So thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Deputy City Manager. And I'll just say that, we need to be looking through the lens of transportation with all of our major growth. And I think that shift is real, and I think that shift is difficult, and I think that it needs to happen, sooner than later. But yeah, I agree. I appreciate your comments, Deputy City Manager. Other comments or questions? Or sorry, you know what, Busy, keep going. What was that next question?
No, this is great. This is really great. The last question that I have is, should a sales tax approved by city residents fund services outside of the city?
Can you ask that question one more time, please?
Should a sales tax approved by city residents fund services outside of the city?
And I'll just say before we dive into a conversation, it makes me think about the FWPP, the watershed protection, and how we're funding as a city with federal partnership the mitigation of trees and overgrowth. Erin, go ahead.
I think what we would have to show is what is the benefit to the city if there is no direct benefit to this. And I think there would be. I think that you could make the case that the more transit provided, the less congestion, the better for everybody. But I really think we'd have to do some math and show the benefit to the city, because I don't live in the city, I live in the county. My first reaction is, no, I don't think that's fair. And then the more I thought about it in a couple of seconds, I thought there just has to be a benefit to those folks. And I don't think they should pay for it by themselves. So.
Thank you. Shane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really have to echo what Erin said. I think that's the key. When you listen to Fred Solip's report, we have an educated, voter population. They like to see it. They like to make sure that it's measurable, that it makes sense, it passes the headline test, all those things. So I really appreciate where Erin's coming from in that comment. I think for me, personally, it would be that plus, showing that maybe there's a different rate altogether. I mean, for instance, the city does provide service outside of the city limits. We provide water and sewer services. We provide reclaimed water services outside of the city limits. But in order for that to be palatable to our residents and our business owners, we do so at a different fee schedule. It's a different rate altogether in order to get across the finish line, with our constituency and the people that we serve. So maybe it's a combination of things, but again, just echoing Erin's comments, the proof is going to be in the pudding, and we're going to want to, the voters are going to want to see how that service outside of the city limits directly impacts and benefits the folks that live here, and it needs to kind of make sense. Again, pass that headline test. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there other comments? I know we're running out of time.
Mr. Chairman, this is Scott Holcomb. Would you mind if I made a quick comment about that?
Please.
Just having gone through dealing with a lot of the economic analysis, dealing with development agreements, gift clause, things of that nature, just a thought to keep in mind is that when you do that type of economic impact analysis, sales tax that are brought into the municipality from those outside, in other words, an analysis of having transport bringing people in who buy things, is an important part of that analysis. And depending on how the analysis came out, could be good part of the sales pitch to show that this will actually benefit the town as well, or the city.
It's a great point. Thank you. That's a great point.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
It's Aaron. Sorry, one last thing.
Yeah.
From a sustainability perspective, I think the more that we can get onto transit, the better it is for our entire climate, and that benefits everybody.
Well, thank you so much for everybody's conversation. It was, I feel like we definitely got answers even if we weren't able to get into the breakout session. So thank you for everybody's contribution on the Flagstaff in Motion today. So more to come in June and August board meetings. And with that, I will hand it over to Heather. Next slide, please, Rhonda.
So briefly, respecting your time, the current events were included in your packet, and I'll just highlight a couple of brief items. We have moved to our phase 3 reopening as part of our plan. There's not a lot of significant changes, but slowly bringing staff back into the workplace. And we will be bringing this item to the board in June for additional consideration. Do we want to modify or change that plan based on current conditions? And then couple quick announcements. We partnered with Coconino County and Supervisor Vasquez to provide free transit to 2 vaccine opportunities in our community. One time was free service on our regular routes, and another time we actually provided a shuttle to that vaccine location. I shared in my report several May anniversaries and want to recognize, Anne is on the phone. Anne is celebrating 7 years with Mountain Line this month, and I want to congratulate her and thank her for being with us. And then lastly, Kate and I are participating both yesterday and again today in APTA's legislative conference and the virtual fly-in, and we will be participating in a transit focused conversation with Senator Sinema's office later today, and hopefully I'll have more to share on those efforts at next month's meeting. And with that, that's all of my current events, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Heather. Any questions? Okay, not seeing any. Interrupt me if you do have one. We'll move on to scheduling. Heather, remind me what it is we're looking to get out of this agenda item.
It's just to make sure everyone is aware of the next meetings. So the TAC will meet on their regular meeting date, Thursday, June 3rd at 10 a.m. and we will be holding that virtually. And our next board meeting will be Wednesday, June 16th, 10 a.m. also planned to be held virtually. We're hoping to return to in-person meetings in August when everybody comes back from the summer recess.
Woo! Exciting.
Yes.
Well, with that, I just want to thank all of you for being part of this team and being on this call today. That was a long meeting and we covered a lot of ground and we had some really good discussions. So that was very beneficial to all of us at Mountain Line. So really appreciate your time and your expertise and your willingness to serve the community of Flagstaff. So TAC members, thank you. Keep up the good work. We'll see you in a little bit and we'll have our next joint meeting in a little while. And then board members, thank you all so much for your participation today and staff, well done. And I think that was a great meeting. Heather, any closing comments?
No closing comments. Thank you all.
All right, we are adjourned. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
Be well.